everybody else was much more important than me. That led to some quite negative self-talk. I had these words running through my head that were really harsh and expected a lot of myself. I also got that feedback from a lot of managers in my corporate days saying, "You're far too hard on yourself." And I dismissed it all thinking, well, actually I just have high standards and that's a good strength. But I wasn't really kind to myself. And it showed up in my behavior too. I put myself last consistently. And how could I expect others to care for me when I was sending out the subconscious message that I didn't really matter and that I wasn't important? I operated under a lot of obligation. My life was full of shoulds. I should be a good daughter. I should help my father with his business. I should be a good brother, a good sister, a good sibling, good friend, good mother, perfect patient mother. All these should. And I didn't cut myself a lot of slack. So for a lot of reasons, and too many to go into in this talk, I suffered a significant burnout. That means I got very sick from stress. When I talk about burnout, I think sometimes people imagine some crazy outburst or maybe some men in white coats trying to squeeze me into the back of a van or something. But it wasn't really like that for me. I just got really tired for a couple of years. From the stress, I developed an autoimmune disease of the thyroid, which means my immune system, which is designed to protect me from viruses and bacteria, actually started attacking my own tissue. I had a lot of terrible symptoms at first. The tremors, heart palpitations, heat sensitivity, sweating, hair loss, irritability, depression, a whole range of symptoms that went on and on. And I struggled, I lost a lot during this time. I lost the ability to run. I used to be an ultramarathon runner, running comrades and 2 oceans. I lost a lot of relationships. I really struggled to maintain business networks and friendships when I was too tired to really get up. I also spent about 3 years recovering, which meant I couldn't work or earn income for 3 years, which was a significant loss to our family and put a lot of strain on our marriage. Through most of my life, I think I had really tightly coupled my identity with my work. So if I had no job and no job title, then who was I? And what was I supposed to do with my life? So at this stage, I felt like a real failure. And I was really confused as to how this happened to me. Everybody else is stressed. I was eating fresh fruit and vegetables, exercising. How come this happened to me? So I gave it a lot of thought and tried to unpack and understand what had happened. And then I realized, well, if I can run 89 kilometers in one day, I can't really be that weak. There's something else going on. And then I realized after a while that it's not the lazy people and the slackers that have burnout. It's actually the people who are really hard on themselves, who push themselves beyond breaking point. The people who like to do a lot of good and people please and look after everybody else. But I just didn't know how to look after myself. I just didn't have the skills. And so I did something that might sound a little bit lame, but it's what I needed at the time. I created a solution for myself. And I called it the self-care roster. So it was effectively a spreadsheet that I used to plan my activities. So if you can imagine at this time, I was too exhausted to really do anything. And being a mother, I still had commitments. My children needed dentist trips, and then the teachers wanted to have meetings about their reports. I still needed to maintain a certain amount of activities in life. But I needed to space them out because they exhausted me so much. I realized in time that if I did more than one thing a day, one outing a day, I was completely and utterly exhausted for days. So I limited myself to 5 outings a week. And one of those outings would be as small as going to Clicks for toiletries, and that I was finished after that. So I used the self-care roster as a little list to guide myself. Well, this week I can do kids' dentist, and next week I can do haircuts. Just spread it all out and plan my life a little bit so that I could cope. I also had forgotten how to look after myself. So I included things like grooming. I put on there, do a face mask today, maybe tomorrow I'll do my own pedicure. And it sounds really boring and ridiculous, but this is what I needed at the time to be able to teach myself how to care for myself again. I also put a bit of fun and learning in there because for me learning is fun, and I put a couple of books I wanted to read, and at the end of the week I looked back on that roster and I saw these little green ticks and I felt accomplished because at a time when I couldn't accomplish anything, at least I could force myself to have an afternoon nap. 3 or 4 days out of 5. And that was an accomplishment because I was taking ownership over my health and my recovery. I said that I couldn't do much, but I could read. That was one of the things that I could do in this time. So I read about 30 books on something called positive psychology, and that is the science of happiness. I figured if my life broke so badly, I need to find research-based strategies to put it back together and to find happiness. I researched all these things and I tried them out. I learned about gratitude and awe and savoring and all of these wonderful things that they've done all these studies about, and I applied them. I tested them out and I did them in my life. One of them was something called flow. So flow is a concept in positive psychology that means you are completely and utterly absorbed in what you're doing. You're so immersed in something that you have completely lost track of time. And you may have experienced this in your own life. You didn't feel hungry or you didn't need the bathroom and you had such an amazing time. Well, if you're able to find these flow activities, they enhance your well-being and your level of happiness. So I figured I needed to find work that aligned with flow so that I could build a happier life. And that for me, after a lot of thinking, was writing. That brought me flow. So I started a blog in 2015 in February, and I wrote about my healing journey and my recovery. People seemed to like it, and they got a lot of benefit around my thinking and my strategies I'd applied. And so then I started to realize, well, maybe I could help some people. Maybe people can learn from my experience. And then I wrote Avoiding Burnout. And the purpose of the book is about helping others not to get quite as sick as I did. I learned also in these times about 3 different things that I'd like to share with you today. The first is called self-efficacy. So this is some of resilience theory that basically means the degree to which you believe you can control your environment. And when we feel disempowered, we don't believe that we control our lives. If we're feeling that life is hopeless and no matter what we do, we're never going to make a difference, that leads to a lot of stress and a lot of unhappiness. That self-care roster that I spoke about, that was my method of gaining some control at a time when I felt completely disempowered. So I was trying to do my little part in recovery to take myself forward. So I'd encourage you to find ways to increase your self-efficacy, find little ways to control your environment, to increase your happiness and to reduce your stress. The second thing I want to tell you about is this whole field within with personal positive psychology called self-compassion. And that basically means being kind to yourself. So they've done at least 100 studies on how being kind to yourself changes your life. And that I found really interesting. It increases your happiness levels, it reduces your stress, removes depression from a lot of people's lives. So it's really important to learn to be good to yourself and treat yourself like a friend. The third thing I want to tell you about is something called deliberate practice. That basically means practice makes perfect. I read 2 books on deliberate practice, and they've done a whole lot of studies about people who are world class in various fields in the world. Ballet dancers, chess players, tennis players. And they learned about how these people become world class, all of the factors and the attributes and the things that they do on a regular basis to become proficient. So one of the things I found really interesting is that the brain actually changes. In as short as 8 weeks, if you apply yourself to something regularly, you can actually build the substance in your brain. It actually changes. So for example, if I do a tennis shot, say it's like swing back, hit the ball over the fence, hopefully over the net and not the fence. So what happens in my brain when I'm doing that is that my neurons are firing around. Mine are a little bit chaotic because I'm not very good at tennis. But when Serena Williams does that, her brain has actually built shortcuts. There's actually this stuff called myelin that builds around those neural pathways and makes them so efficient. And that's why when she plays a tennis shot, she can be consistent and so perfect in every time. I wanted to use what I'd learned, this deliberate practice, to make my life better. And obviously I needed some help with my stress management, so I thought, well, I want to apply this to meditation. I'd also read that the happiest people in the world are the monks in the Himalayas who spend a large portion of their day meditating, and they are exceptionally happy. So I could do with being happy and I could do with better stress management. So I did what every self-respecting person does, and I downloaded an app, and I sat on my bed and programmed it for 2 minutes, and I listened to this rain and panpipish music, and it didn't work very well. I had all these thoughts of how am I going to get better, and my life is over, and what am I going to do next? And so that meditation was a bit of a disaster. My next step was to go onto YouTube. So there were some guided meditation videos there, and I tried them out, and they were pretty good, but not exactly what I was looking for. So as I like to do, I did a whole lot of research. I went online and I looked at all the styles and types and what you can do. And I learned about this thing called this chanting meditation. So it wasn't really my style, but I thought, well, you know, novelty, learning new things, broadening your horizons, that makes you happy too, so let me try that. I waited for everyone to leave the house because small children watching me chanting would really not work well. So my family left the house, and I lay on my bedroom floor with my arms at my side. I closed my eyes and I gave it a try. Oh, it didn't last very long, because my cat, out of grave concern for my sanity, started pawing me in the face, and I had to stop for fits of laughter. And then within a week or so, I had a friend who recommended a course. It was 8 weeks long, incidentally the same time that myelin can start forming. It was 1 night a week, so I could put it in my self-care roster and I could plan around it. And I knew that I would be motivated by the embarrassment of not having done my homework. So I did my homework every day. I meditated for 20 minutes every day for 8 weeks. And on the other side, I emerged a much calmer person and a much more patient mother. And I must confess, I don't meditate every day, but I do try a couple of times a week. And the days where I do tend to work out a whole lot better than the other days. The cat is no longer with us. She has crossed the rainbow bridge. But all these years, so I've spent 3 years investing in myself, trying to recover, trying to rapidly, as rapidly as possible, get myself to working normally again. And so I've become a lot stronger on the other side of this phase. I changed a lot of relationships. I had to end some that weren't working for me. I actually kicked people out of my life who weren't supporting me. I put better boundaries in with those who were also not that great, and I brought closer the ones who were supportive. I changed my diet, my lifestyle, the amount that I sleep, what I eat. I changed a whole lot of aspects of my life, and of course I changed my work. I align myself with my strengths. I forgive my faults and my weaknesses, and I'm much more willing to care for others because I've done this. I know that when my needs are met, I'm much happier, I'm much nicer to be around, and I'm much more willing to give. So I'd like to compel you that the biggest investment you can make in your life is in yourself. So please start by being kind to yourself first.